Welcome to the second talk. So I'm Sebastian. I'm working as a postdoc with the database group of the university here. I'm also a scientist at Amazon, but today I'm here as member of the Apache Software Foundation. So Isabel invited me to this meetup to talk about remote teams, and basically the first thing that came to my mind was software development at Apache, because that's basically remote by definition. And there is a set of things that Apache does in a certain manner, and that's usually referred to as the Apache way. And basically the goal of the talk is to give you a brief overview of these principles and how Apache works as an organization. And feel free to interrupt me anytime and ask me questions.
One interruption. Sebastian means the Apache Software Foundation, not the Apache Web Server.
Wow. We will see that.
Okay, sorry.
So first, one clarification: what is open source? I mean, can be many different definitions. For me, open source is simply a synonym for the process of community-based development of free software. And I guess all of you know this, especially you guys. Free software is software that gives you the 4 elemental freedoms. So you can run the program for any purpose. You can study how the program works. You can change it and reuse it. And most differences are just in basically the license, the rights that other people have once you distribute that. And yeah, open source or free software is everywhere. So there's Firefox, there's GNU Linux, there is the Apache Web Server or Hadoop. I guess that every person in this room implicitly or explicitly uses at least one of these things. So, I don't know, the Apache Web Server runs 2/3 of all the websites in the world, for example. And the Apache Software Foundation itself is a US-based non-profit public charity organization, which provides a foundation for open collaborative software development. And it gives its projects hardware, communication, and business infrastructure. And it also has an independent legal entity to basically protect the developers from lawsuits that people might make against the foundation. And it protects the brand, and it's one of the largest open source organizations, maybe the largest ever. And at the moment, the ASF develops, stewars, and incubates more than 350 different programs, really large scale. The actual history of the Apache Software Foundation comes from this Apache Web Server. In 1995, people from the Supercomputing Center in the USA had developed this NCSA web server and basically abandoned it. So for some reason, they had other things to do. And a group of volunteers stepped up and basically took over the development of this server. And they called themselves the Apache Group. And the server was freely available with source code and open licensing, and they started to exchange fixes and set up a mailing list and basically take care of the project. They chose the name Apache out of respect for the Native American Apache Nation, and within a few years, from 1995 to 1999, they basically made the Apache web server together with the users become the leader of the market, which it still is. So, approximately 2/3 of all the websites in the world still run this Apache web server. And the web grew bigger, the project grew bigger, and basically sister projects started to come up from Apache. And that gave the need for a more coherent and structured organization that could provide a framework for all of that. So people founded this foundation structure. And the basic idea in Apache is always that you have these separate communities, these projects that basically govern themselves and that are very independent from each other, but they all share a set of goals and a set of like cultural traditions and a certain etiquette. So every project has the authority over its own software development, and there are some rules, and the board of Apache governs the foundation and kind of has the responsibility to see that the projects follow these rules. And then the projects themselves are governed by these project management committees, the PMCs, and these PMCs communicate with the boards. So that's an overview of the structure. So at the heart is the board of 9 directors, and one of them is sitting here. Then there's basically the foundation side, so there are 400 members and 10 of these officers. And then there's the project side of things. So there are the project management committees of all the projects and the committers, which basically have access to the source code of the projects. And the main interaction is between the board and the PMCs. And the board is elected by the members. So Apache is kind of a very structured and hierarchical organization. And there are a lot of predefined rules that people have. Which maybe sounds a bit scary, but I think it's a good thing because it provides a clear path for new people to join and to become responsible members of the community. So the first thing that people could be is a user. So user is anybody who uses the software and somehow interacts with the communities by giving bug reports or by writing on the mailing list, by helping other users, for example. And the next level would be a contributor. Contributor is a person that in some form provides code or documentation to the project. So these contributors typically participate on the mailing lists and then send in fixes or patches or pull requests to the projects that can make it to the actual source code. And if you do this often enough and annoy people often enough, and they kind of trust you that the things that you do make sense, then the project can elect you to become a so-called committer. And a committer is simply a developer that is given direct write access to the repository, that also has to sign a license agreement, and gets an Apache org email address and makes short-term decisions for the project. So that's mostly the software development side of things. There's a second set of rules, which is roles which is more organizational. So there are the PMC members. PMC is the project management committee, and they basically govern the project. So a PMC member is typically a committer that is elected to then also become a PMC member because they took care of the project. PMC members can vote for community-related decisions. So for example, they can elect new committers and they can vote for releases. And there's one special person in the PMC who is the PMC chair, and that is basically the person that communicates with the board. So the PMC has to submit a report, I think, every 2 months. Every 3 months, and basically the PMC chair is the person that gets pinged if there's something wrong with the report. And then the last level that people can achieve is to become an actual member of the foundation. And in order to become that, you have to show that you care really about the foundation itself and not only about a single project. So people who are members of the Apache Software Foundation typically organize meetups and make sure that projects are well integrated and that people get to know each other, stuff like that. And in order to become an ASF member, you have to be invited, and people have to vote for you. And then you can invite new members and you can participate in the election of the board. So that's all the formal stuff. The actual interesting thing in my eyes is that I don't really think that Apache works because of these rules. I think Apache works very well because all the software development is based on a set of principles, and I think the rules, these roles, somehow emerge from these principles. And I'd like to walk you through a few of these. So I think the most important principle is community. So that means even though the end goal of all of that is to provide great software to the world, the most important thing is really to establish strong communities for long-lasting projects. And I think you probably cannot produce great software without that. The second principle is so-called meritocracy and duocracy. And that means that the responsibility and also the influence that you have in a project are related to the impact and the work that you put into the project. So it's not like a formal thing with political battles or so. Usually it's the people who do the work that should make the decisions. And that's also open to new members, because it basically says if you come to the project, if you put in work, if you participate, then this will be acknowledged and you will become a very respected member. Another principle that I find very interesting is merit never expires. So that means even if you're not active all the time, there's nobody pushes you out of the community, for example. So I'm not that active with software development in the Apache Software Foundation for 1 or 2 years now, and it's not a problem. And I think this is something that that also contributes to this long-term vision of the project. So it's totally okay to be active for some time, and then maybe your life changes because, I don't know, you have a new job or you become a parent, and then you cannot code that much anymore. But it's totally okay. So the goal is really to have a strong community, and then other people will step up, and nobody will I don't know, will be angry if you don't show up that often. And another important principle is that individuals compose the Apache Software Foundation. I think nowadays that's the most controversial thing, because there's a lot of money at the moment is to be made with open source software, especially in the Hadoop and machine learning area. And a lot of big companies are also starting to move a lot of code to the Apache Software Foundation, which in general is a good thing. But really the expectation is, even if you're paid to do the Apache-based software development, you should participate as an individual. So you shouldn't wear your company hat, you should participate as the own individual. And I think nowadays there are some political battles sometimes going on that members of the one team are not invited to meetups of another project and stuff like that. Sorry?
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Wasn't that always the case? Like 10 years ago, it was like IBM and Sun compared a lot of code in the Apache Foundation.
It's a recurring pattern. As
Yeah, okay.
you have technologies, it's like very, very popular that you have companies trying to control these projects.
Yeah.
So it's like one issue that the ASF has to deal with. The other issue is companies, like if you have a team that's working on a project and that project usually would be a failing project, it can still be phrased as a successful project if you dump it into the ASF and then you somehow have to build a community around it. So this is like two issues that people have to deal with.
The last two principles is if it didn't happen on the mailing list, it didn't happen. So that basically means that the mailing list should be the central piece of communication for the project, and I'll have some exercise for that. And the last thing, that's more a fun thing that I find pretty interesting and important, is Unix law of half-baked patches. So that says a half-baked patch with no documentation, no tests, and no backwards compatibility is better than no patch at all. So that basically means that every contribution is valuable. People should have the courage to simply step up and send things to the community and interact, even if it's not the perfect thing that they give to the community. I'd like to dive into 2 more things before we end this talk. One thing is communication. I think that's what's most important for this remote nature of the teams. And the communication is mainly done via mailing lists. So these mailing lists then become like virtual meeting rooms, and the communication happens asynchronously. That can be a bit tedious because it might take a day or so until you get an answer. But I think for Apache projects, it's simply a general requirement because the groups are geographically distributed. They are in different time zones, and what's maybe more important, it's not everybody's day job to work in an Apache project. So a lot of people are doing it in their free time or on the weekend. So it's very important to have like this buffer of time always. And then I think recently some projects additionally use more synchronous messaging. For example, there are IRC chats which typically get logged so that people can read what happened there. And most teams try to have regular Google Hangouts. Usually you have you have this effect that somebody has to get up at night and talk to the people.
What about issue trackers?
That's usually done via Jira.
Isn't that
It's mirrored to the mailing list.
Yeah.
So you can still subscribe to a
Right.
mailing list and you read all the issues, and that's
Yeah.
fine. You don't have to go online and check it. You can still rely on your inbox. So the canonical archive is your mailing list.
Yeah.
Yeah, this archiving is very important. So you can join a project, you can read up on that, and it also allows you to basically structure your time. So if you cannot participate in the community for 1 or 2 weeks, it doesn't really matter, because you can always go to the archive and read up what happened. And yeah, that's really bound to the volunteer nature of these communities. And last thing that I would mention is the decision-making process, which in my eyes is working remarkably well. So very often on the internet, people start fights and flame wars, and I think in Apache this happens surprisingly few times. So one thing that helps with the decision making is that the projects are normally auto-governing. So every project is like an entity of itself, and it's driven by the people who volunteer for the job. And then there are some events where coordination is required. For example, election of new committers or releases, and then typically some voting processes started. So usually the votes last for 3 to 5 days, so that you have some time to participate. And voting is done with numbers, so you write a mail with +1 to say that you're positive on the issue, 0 if you have no opinion, don't want to participate, and a -1 if you have a negative vote. And there are 2 very special things that, in my eyes, make this work. The first thing is that Apache has a so-called lazy consensus approach. So that means the only requirement for a successful vote is that you need a few positive votes. I think it's usually three positive votes. So not everybody has to vote. There's the assumption that if you don't vote, you're lazily in consensus. So I think that's very good, because it helps. It's very pragmatic, and it also helps because people cannot show up later and say, I wasn't okay with that, because there was the voting period. Usually it's 3 to 5 days. So people should find some time to issue their opinion. And if you didn't vote, then you were lazily okay with it. The other thing is that if you issue a negative vote, then you must include an alternative proposal or some detailed explanation for that. So that kind of prevents trolling, that people would just veto stuff. Yes?
Who has to offer the alternative? Everyone who has a negative vote, or?
Yeah, the person who does the negative vote.
And if there's a second, or I mean, you can in second, like have a negative vote, and you can second that only, or only give your explanation.
So usually the negative votes are it's very, very rare that there's a negative vote, and usually
It's exhausting. Because it's exhausting also, I mean.
Yeah. So usually if there's a negative vote, there immediately starts some discussion around that. So that is this consensus gathering. So if there is a negative vote, then usually that means there is some issue that needs to be addressed immediately. And it works remarkably well. So for some reason, people have really a very optimistic and constructive attitude towards these projects. So I'm always surprised that it works in the majority of cases. And so that was the overview of Apache. I basically just summarized this website, which has much more details if you're interested. And other than that, feel free to contact me via Twitter, web, or email, and feel free to ask me more questions.
I have one more thought on the decision. Let's say there's 4 pro and there's 1 in con, and it says something with the description. And then you have a discussion going on, but is there still the possibility of he's overtaken, or it has to be solved?
It depends. You usually start a new voting thread. So after all of the disagreement has been ruled out, in the technical project, you start a new vote thread on the new proposals that supposedly is going to get consensus. So there's no overvoting.
Okay, yeah, I'm just thinking the person makes an alternative, but maybe the majority does not like it. So can we be overtaken, over decided? Or not? That's the one. No. There's always somewhere about
I mean, often these things are, for example, should this person become a committer? And then it's basically a yes or no thing. And then if somebody says -1, then they have to have some very valid reason why this would be the case. Or with a release, for example, release votes are the other thing that happens very often. And, I mean, the alternative would usually be to say, okay, we do it 1 month later and address this one more thing that came out of.
So
but this is an interesting example. Let's say there's a new committer, and then 5 say yes, I'm pro. It's only input, whatever contribution. And there's one person saying, the thing is private life, he's doing some political bad stuff, whatever. But then it's hard to find a consensus.
Yeah, I mean, I think
because some people might think, yeah, but anyway, technically he's very good. Well, the other things we have on the political side.
That's an interesting question. So, I mean, there are some of these principles, but I think the general rule is if the project cannot resolve this conflict, then the issue goes to the board, and the board has to find a solution, right?
Which again usually means discussing with people, trying to find consensus, trying to get everyone on board. So this is what makes the ASF decision making pretty long. This is also what means that everyone gets to participate in the decision making, and what also means that one person cannot really control that project.
What kind of things are going into these votes? Is that just organizational stuff?
Sorry?
What kind of things are going into these votes? Is that just organizational stuff, or
No,
mostly micromanaging technical decisions?
So technical stuff in a well-functioning project should be decided upon the principle of who does the work is the one who decides what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Usually it's who gets to be a committer. There's definitely a release vote going on each release because PMC members are supposed to check the release artifacts for whether this is really supposed to be shipped to downstream users. So you need 3 + 1 votes on each release, and each one of these should have checked is the MD5 hash correct, are there any bugs in there, can it be built from source, etc.
Yeah.
That's that kind of voting grounds.
That makes sense.
So it's usually in most projects that are well-functioning, you shouldn't have it on a JIRA issue by JIRA issue basis, but you should have it per release. Should we do a release? Maybe. You should do it for, do we want a new committer? Do we want a new ASF member? Which one do we want to have as ASF board member? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's really like the exception.
Yeah, so I dismantle of the Linux Foundation alternative, where you have all these pull requests bubbling up to sort of permutate the install files get to say yes or no.
So CSF explicitly doesn't have this maintainership model, but everyone on the project is responsible for all the code base, and everyone is supposed to be able to contribute patches, and projects are supposed to be welcoming to newcomers. There are projects that will have problems with that, but in an ideal world, the goal is to pull in new people and to avoid the kind of gatekeepership.
Yeah, makes sense.
In a very fragmented organization where you have like multiple entities and multiple CTOs, do you know anybody trying to apply this kind of governance level at the kind of corporate level?
So there's quite a few Apache committers working for companies, and of course they are trying to pull the ways to work at Apache inside their companies. One tweet I've read this morning comes from Adobe, but there's definitely other companies who are looking into it.
I actually my best with putting in contact because I can have that kind of challenge in my next role. So yeah.
So for Adobe, that's the tweet came from an Apache board member, a long-term board member who used to work for Day Software, and at Days they were trying to map this kind of collaboration models that works at CASF to their day-to-day software development. And he is now trying to establish that within Adobe.
Okay.
But there's definitely other companies there as well.
I guess this kind of model works also well when multiple companies need to work together, right? So,
Yes, that's what it's built for.
yeah.
So what Sebastian mentioned was people participate as individuals. I participate as Isabel. I don't participate as I work for Nokia. I don't participate as I work for Elastic. I participate as Isabel. As soon as I switch jobs, I take my merit with me.
Yeah.
It's not that a company is supposed to commit bid and everything gets channeled through that, but it's the individual doing that. And this is also something that for companies encountering Apache for the first time is something that's very hard to grasp.
Yeah. I guess that's the big difference with Apache and the Eclipse Foundation, for example.
Yeah. So this is strongly built around the individual level. A very famous concept is the concept of many hats. I have an Apache board member hat, I have an Apache member hat, I have a software development at Elastic hat, etc. And these are supposed to be distinct.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you share also?
Just one more question or remark. It seems like said that these rules in the beginning, like that there's a set of rules in Apache and they all derive from these principles. And you said you find it probably important that it's not the other way around. Yeah. As compared to other distributed teams or companies, organizations, who are usually afraid of, or at least when they start these processes, they're afraid of having too many rules because it's kind of bureaucracy and so on and so on. So would this be something that would actually advertise as being maybe helpful to other distributed organizations to have a certain set of rules, although small, or like a set of principles, to actually guide this kind of, all these other aspects like decision making, communication, all these aspects that we talked about before. To actually have some sort of written down rules that can be changed, but that because you don't have this everybody in one room and let's see what's happening.
I think you can go one step further. So, so I work in a startup, right? So it's a very small company, typically short-lived. People have in common that they typically come from a background of having worked in other startups and probably work in more startups. So it's a very loose collection of people distributed across the world that are doing stuff together. Having sort of a working template, okay, how do we interact with each other on a day-to-day basis? What is sort of the mental model for decision making? It's kind of helpful if you step in and you can hit the ground running, right? So if you need to onboard, say, a new Android developer for 6 months before you can do useful work, it's probably not ideal at the startup. So we pretty much did the opposite. So we had another guy joining 2 months ago and was hitting codes like the second week he was doing stuff. Basically, to our customers the third week. So that basically means that you need a very lightweight kind of organizational model. The other thing that is sort of typical, especially in distributed organizations, is that the management hierarchy is a bit less clear, right? So in a company, it's like your boss tells you to do this, and you tell your subordinates to do it, and then stuff gets done. That doesn't work necessarily if you have like a contractor sitting in India for 2 months.
I guess my question was more like this, people tend to shy away from this having too many explicit rules, but maybe this is something that helps in certain respects when they're not too tight.
Yeah.
If you read any book on how to do open source, the first thing it will tell you is to have a clear mission statement. This is the first thing that you write down, so that people who join the project know what they are up for, and people who want to join with a different idea know that, I'm sorry, this is not going to happen here. And the second thing that we will read is that as soon as you want to grow that project, you won't be able to tell each and every one in a face-to-face communication how things work. So in order to grow your organization, you have to write down the kind of culture you want. There's also things called code of conduct explained to that. There's stuff like project bylaws that we have in Apache. Write it down so that in case you have a conflict, you have something that you can refer to.
It doesn't have to be cast in stone, right?
Yeah.
It needs to be adaptable very quickly, but this is, I'm just like reiterating, this is something people say, like, we don't have politics, we don't want politics, but this is actually politics, so this is actually something that I found quite interesting, that people that work in these kind of loose environments actually, after a short time, start embracing that, so start looking for this kind of, well, yeah, actually, this is politics, and this is nothing to be afraid of, but actually helpful in a certain way, if it's not sort of, there's always these extremes, right?
In my experience, politics is going to be there everywhere because it means somehow controlling that the original idea of the project stays there. And I think it's something that we are afraid because of the way we have done the social interactions in organized organizations. But if the rules are clear and the motivation is clear, this is already something that sets you up for success. Because if you like the mantras, if you like the motivation, you can join. If not, it will not be for the hand. This is the way, like Apache, this is the way we work. If you like, join. If you don't like, maybe go to Jimmy or someone else.